So this is a full guide to swimming freestyle. Who this video is for? So if you're a swimmer or you're interested in swimming and would like to get better at freestyle, regardless if you can't swim 10 meters without drowning or you can swim a 50-second 100 freestyle, I promise there's going to be at least some value in this video. So freestyle is something that's really intricate. I'm still learning different ways to swim it faster to this day. So when I was researching for this video, I learned things that I'd never known before about swimming freestyle that I actually started implementing in my training. So it's been really eye-opening for me, and I hope it can be the same for you guys. So, quick introduction. My name is Lachlan, and I swam competitively throughout high school before retiring in 2018. So since then, I've been a swimming coach for about 3 years' time, and subscribe for more guides. So on the left over here is me when I started my competitive swimming career. So this is one of my first meets for the Sydney Olympic Park Aquatic Centre. Don't remember how I went, but it was a great time regardless. And this is me coaching in my uniform after a shift. So yeah, moving on now. So this is what we're going to be going through today. We're going to start off with talking about drag and propulsion before moving into breathing and going into head position, hand entry, your arm trajectory, your pull, and then finally the kick. So we're going to be starting off with drag and propulsion. But before this, if you're a more advanced swimmer, feel free to skip to the other parts of this video that you might find more beneficial for you. So these beginning two sections are more so for beginners. So swimming is a battle between your drag and your propulsive forces. So drag is something that slows you down, and propulsion is whatever pushes you forwards. But there are also two other forces, such as gravity and buoyancy, but we're not going to be worrying about them in this video. We're just going to be focusing solely on drag and propulsion. And throughout this video, I'm going to be referring to these two forces a lot, just to really hammer that point in. So it's really quite simple. You want to maximize your propulsion and minimize drag. So if your drag is greater than your propulsion, you're going to sink and you're not going to move very far. If your propulsion is greater than your drag, you will definitely move forwards. So in your swimming freestyle, you want to do everything possible to maximize your propulsion while minimizing your drag. And that's what I'm going to be going through all these different chapters over here, detailing strategies for you to maximize your propulsion and also minimize your drag. So these two factors are really the key point of this whole guide. So it's really important that we establish that early. So a quick example I'd like to give is a speedboat. So we all know what a speedboat is, and these are actually really efficient at minimizing drag and maximizing propulsion. So the key thing here we can see right away is that the hull is extremely streamlined. So this is going to allow water to flow smoothly over the surface and minimize the surface area in contact with the water. It's also designed really sharp so that it can cut through the water and reduce the impact of waves. So there's not going to be much drag there. And also, I'm sure you guys all know, speedboats have incredibly powerful propellers or engines or whatever you call them at the back of their bodies, and that's what really propels them forwards. So that's sort of an example just to set up what drag and propulsion is, just to get that in our minds. So the goal of this guide is to teach you how to maximize the propulsion you create while minimizing drag. So that getting started, let's get into our breathing. So breathing on land is so different to breathing on water. Breathing on land is something we can take easily for granted. You do it without thinking. But as soon as you get into the water, you're going to find that this changes so much. And a lot of people, for the first time, when they try to swim freestyle, they end up panicking because they don't know how to breathe. They're used to just breathing normally without thinking about it. But swimming forces you to actually think about when to exhale and when to inhale. That's the beautiful thing about it. So once we get this down pat, we can then start talking about technique, what good technique looks like, what bad technique also looks like. So there's actually a distinct pattern for breathing. You first start by exhaling through the nose and inhaling through the mouth, as we can see with the swimmer over here. So as he's turning to breathe, he's exhaling everything throughout the nose, and we can see those air bubbles just coming out right over there. And that's what you want. So, like I said earlier, as you turn your head to breathe, you really want to be exhaling the air out of your lungs and through your nose. This is really crucial because you can't take in more air when your lungs are already full. If you don't believe me, just try it. I'm being serious. Try it. So, take a deep breath, and then what you're then going to do is hold it for a couple seconds and then try and take another breath on top of that. Ready? So if you tried that, like I might look a bit stupid, but it actually is quite difficult. And you can imagine once you bring the element of swimming into it, it's going to be even more harder. And that's why a lot of people, when they first start, struggle with their breathing. So it's really important that we get this rhythm down pat. So once again, as you turn to take a breath, like I'm doing, you exhale out of your nose. And then once you're exhaled, your head should be turned to the side. Nice and simple. No need to raise it all the way up like this. Keep it to the side. All right. And then what you do, I need to really make sure to explicitly state this. You open your mouth and you take a really quick breath. It's really that simple. Just don't overcomplicate it. I had a swimmer one time who I was coaching that he exhaled good, but then when he turned his head, there was nothing, and he swam back down. And constantly over time, he'd struggled to breathe. And I told him, "Are you opening your mouth?" Because he was not doing that. So I had to remind him over and over again. So it's really that rhythm you need to get down and really try and understand, guys. It's really simple. Don't overcomplicate it. Also, like I mentioned earlier, a really common issue I see is people over rotating the head when they go to breathe, especially for beginners. So the swimmer on the right here, no idea who he is. I'm sure he's a great guy to know, but he's really over rotating his head, and you don't want that when you breathe. It's going to cause you to take a longer breath, and since your head is so high up, I'll get into this shortly later. But since your head is so high up, with both goggles out of the water, his hips and his legs are going to be sinking down like this. And it's going to cause his body to create so much more drag. And we don't want that. Instead, what we want is to have a slight head turn, like the swimmer on the right over here, with around one goggle in the water and one goggle out the water. And I'm also going to get into this shortly, but you don't need to worry about water getting into your mouth, because with swimming, you actually end up creating a bow wave, and I'll explain that shortly. But this bow wave is going to create a pocket for you to breathe comfortably. So you don't need to worry about water getting in your mouth. Just make sure you turn your head slightly, nice and sharp, get a nice breath, and then back. That's how simple it is. So we're now going to move on to our head position. So I should have mentioned this earlier, but when analyzing technique, I like to start from the top of the body and then make my way down. So that's what we're doing now, starting with our head position. So I'm going to explain what the bow wave is. So on the left over here, we have a ship moving through water, and what the bow wave is the wave that's created at the front when an object moves through a body of water. So in the case here, we have this little lump of water over here. And in the case of our swimmer on the right, you see the water coming over his head around there? That's the bow wave he's creating. So whenever something moves forward through water, it's always going to create a bow wave. Okay? So we can see on the ship on the left here, it's really quite smooth and efficient, and sort of the same thing can be seen in the swimmer on the right. So having a higher head position will increase the frontal drag by creating a larger bow wave. I'm going to say it again. Having a higher head position, so your head's up or you're looking forward when you shouldn't be, is going to increase frontal drag by creating a larger bow wave. So more water is going to be colliding with your face, which is what you don't want. It seems bad, but it's not the end of the world, right? Like, yeah, your face is already in the water, what's it make a difference if a bit more water is, coming towards you? But actually, your head position is what dictates your body position. So actually, having a high head position, which means you're going to have a larger bow wave and more drag, is going to prevent your body from being straighter and more streamlined. So your hips will actually sink and your back will arch upwards. Ouch. So this is a really exaggerated case over here. So we can see that this guy is really a beginner. And the reason his body position is like this is because, if you can tell, you might have to zoom in a bit, his head is actually way higher than it needs to be. So the higher your head is, the bigger the bow wave. Or more simply, if I was to rephrase it, you want to minimize the size of your bow wave. And one of the best ways to do that is to have a good head position where your head is locked down nice and tight. So instead of having water come towards your face, like splash in your face with a lot of surface area getting hammered, you want to touch the tip of your head and have that be in line of the water. So we notice the big difference in surface area there. So you can either have your face coming in contact with the water, or you can have the tip of your head coming in contact with the water. Big difference in surface area. So, like I mentioned earlier, we can minimize this bow wave by having a lower head position. This will cause the bow wave to flow over your head as opposed to just being right in your face. So once this is done, you'll find that your body will be much more aligned and streamlined, and you're also going to propel yourself forwards with little resistance. So looking at this swimmer on the left here, we find that they have a perfect head position, head locked in between the arms, looking straight down. And that's what you want. And you'll find that when they swim their freestyle, their bow wave is going to be really small, like this person's over here on the right. And that's essentially what you want. A really small bow wave that's going to kind of minimize drag and help you get a better body position in the water. So really, just saying again, tuck that head down. You should be looking straight to the bottom of the pool, or maybe a bit more forwards, but you should not be looking up. Okay, do not look up. So the next thing we're going to talk about is arm entry or hand entry. So hand entry is something that's very easy to overlook, and it sets up the rest of your stroke, especially the pull. So there are three common issues with hand entry. The first one on the left over here is when you enter with the thumb first. We don't want that. You want to be entering with your fingers tips first, not your thumb. So should be middle finger, index finger, and ring finger entering first, not your thumb. This guy's clearly over rotating. The one in the middle over here, you might not see something wrong there, but they're cupping the water or they're bending their wrist too much. And what's going to happen is that when they enter the water, there's going to be all this drag and resistance hitting their hand because their wrist is flexed so much. And we don't want that. And this third swimmer on the right over here, the hand is entering the water way off to the side. Okay, so ideally in your swimming, you want the hand to enter in line with your shoulder, but this swimmer over here, the hand is entering off the side of their shoulder, and we don't want that. So also, just continuing on with this swimmer on the left, because his thumb is entering first, if you actually do this motion, you find that your elbow is actually going to hit the water first with this motion, or it's going to hit much earlier than it should. And when he starts to pull, his elbow is going to drop first. And we don't want a low elbow in our pull. We want a nice high elbow. And for the swimmer on the right over here, there's a lot of wasted movement in that technique. So what's going to happen is that once they enter the water, they're going to have to move their hand inwards and then start their pull, as opposed to just going forwards and back. So there's a lot of wasted movement there. So what we should see with hand entry is your hand entering at a slight angle with minimal splash. Your fingertips need to be pointed forwards with your middle finger, index finger, and ring finger entering first. And once your hand enters the water, make sure you really reach forwards with your fingers slightly splayed. So I really get the question a lot of how far apart should my fingers be? And there's a really quick tip to figure out how far apart they should be. So what you do is that you sit down on a chair and you simply put your hand over your knees, and you'll find that your fingers will be apart slightly. And this is how far apart they should be. Okay, so not rigid like this, not apart like this, but lightly splayed. So that's how much they should be lightly apart. So up next, we're going to talk about our arm trajectory. So what do you do as your hand enters the water? What you should not do is overextend your arms. Like this happens when people try to really reach forwards, extend the stroke as much as they can. Well, good intentions, not good results. What this is going to cause is that this, once again, is going to cause your elbow to land in the water first. And that when you finally start your pull, you'll find that your elbow is going to get really low, and we really don't want that. It's going to create so much more drag, and your pull is going to be 10 times weaker. The next issue is overreaching across the midline. So what I want you to imagine is a line going through the middle of your body. Your hand should not cross that midline once it enters the water. So like I mentioned earlier, your hand really needs to land in line with your shoulders. But a common issue I see with beginner swimmers is that when they land, or the arm movement crosses the midline. And what that's going to do is that's going to create a lot of wasted movement, because once your hand enters, you don't have to go out again and then pull backwards. And we don't want that. Also, it's going to put way more strain on your shoulder, your biceps, and overall deltoids, like I mentioned. And you don't want that, because over time that could really lead to an injury. And the last thing you want to do is be put out of the water, which you don't want. So instead, this is what you should do. So your hand should be exiting the water right next to your thigh. Once that's done, your elbow needs to be nice and high, and you move your arm up and over your head, not around your head. All right, so this is a really good cue I like to use with the swimmers I teach. Make sure your arm goes up and over as opposed to around. So around might be a bit more comfortable for some people, but what that does is that it really enforces the concept of crossing over your midline. And like I said, we don't want that. Crossing over your midline leads to a lot of wasted movement, because your hand has to go outwards again and then back. Also, it's going to put a lot of strain on your deltoid and your bicep, because it's going so deep underwater in such an unnatural position. It's much better to just go up and over, forwards and back. So what we're going to be talking about next is the freestyle pull, or the catch, whatever you want to call it. So once your hand is in the water, what the hell do you do? So you have two options, and there are two distinct styles of pulling depending on the type of event you want to swim. So on the left over here, we have Caleb Dressel swimming with a straight arm freestyle. And on the right over here, we have Katie Ledecky swimming with a nice high elbow catch. So in other words, this comes back to our original point. You can either increase propulsion with a straight arm freestyle pull, or you can decrease drag with a high elbow catch like Katie Ledecky over here. So for straight arm, this is so much more powerful than having a high elbow catch, but the caveat is that that creates so much more drag, because your front arm is so the surface area in the water with your front arm is going to be so much larger. And also, it's really impossible to swim for events over 50 meters, because eventually the drag and the fatigue it creates is going to catch up to you. The way this works is that your shoulder acts as a fulcrum and your hand is the lever. And because your hand is so far away from your shoulder, you require so much more force to pull your hand through the water. But yes, your stroke is more powerful, but at the same time, it's really easy to tire out. So this is why we only see this sort of stroke used in 50-meter freestyle events. So the other type of pull you can do is a high elbow pull, and I really recommend this for beginner swimmers. So despite being less powerful, there's so much less drag when using this type of stroke, and it can be used for all distances, and it's really versatile. You can even sprint with this one if you want. It's really simple. We have Katie Ledecky over here. She has a really high catch, so her elbow is up nice and high in the water, as shallow as it can be, and she's pulling back. Nice and simple like that. So, also, just going to discuss a pro tip. A lot of people, when they swim their freestyle, they relax their wrist way too early in their pull. So, what you actually want to do is make sure you keep your wrist dorsiflexed at the end of your pull. This is a really pro tip I wish I knew earlier. So, when you think about it, hand comes in, you start pulling back, back. And then people let their wrists relax. But what you actually want to do is dorsiflex it right at the end to maximize the amount of water you're pushing back before your hand comes up. So you're not stopping your pull early. So like I said earlier, once your hand comes in, push the water back. And once you get to this point over here, you really want to make sure you dorsiflex, get it nice and tight, and really push the last bit of water back before your hand comes up. Okay? Really pro tip I wish I knew earlier. So for those who don't know, dorsiflexing is when you cock your wrist upwards like this. And sort of like this swimmer is doing over here on the right. So the last thing we're going to be talking about is our kick. So kicking on land does not translate to kicking in the water. So if you're a really great soccer player and you love to kick penalties, that means nothing in the world of swimming. Completely different mechanics at hand. So freestyle kick contains a downwards and an upwards kick. In the up kick, the leg is straight with the ankles flexed and your leg is moving up. Really self-explanatory. On the down kick, the knee is bent and pushing into the water, so your leg is moving down. So this is actually a photo of me here. And so for my left leg here, I'm about to start the down kick. So we can see that because my knee is bent and I'm about to push into the water and my leg's about to move down. See that bent knee over there? And for my leg on the right, I'm about to start my up sweep. My leg is nice and straight, about to move up. So in swimming, just keep this in mind. There's a down sweep and our up sweep in our kick. So ankle flexibility is the key for having a great kick. But some people I know don't have great ankle flexibility. And these people also, on a side note, usually aren't breaststrokers. But that can be a topic for another video. So if you don't have good ankle flexibility, overbending the knee can be an alternative way to generate the same amount of propulsion. However, at the start, this is going to result in greater drag and deceleration. And we can clearly see that because you're going to be creating so much more water resistance because your knee is going to be going so much more further down into the water. So more water is going to be hitting your leg. It's going to lead to more surface area exposed to the water. And we can sort of see that in that image over here. Also, underbending the kick is also a really common issue. So that happens when there's too little bend in the knee for the up kick and the heels don't break the surface of the water. Also, that's a really great indicator if someone is under kicking, the heels don't break the surface of the water. So there should definitely be some splash in your freestyle kick. So this is not going to generate enough power or forwards momentum to push a swimmer forward effectively. You want to find a midpoint between under and over kicking. Actually, there is an optimal angle for this, which is 60 degrees. I'm not sure why this says 66 degrees, guys. Just ignore that. Imagine this says 60. So this reduces drag without compromising on power. So 60 degrees is the optimal angle you want in your leg here for your kick. Pro tip. So that concludes our quick guide to swimming freestyle. We went through our drag and propulsion, breathing, head position, hand entry, arm trajectory, kick, and pull. So, for further videos discussing these topics, I have slow versus fast freestyle, instantly fix your freestyle kick, how to stop your legs sinking in freestyle, and how to breathe like an Olympic swimmer. I'll link all of these videos in the description below. And if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. Please make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. It means a lot to me.